Katie, thanks for being here. Really, more of an informal kind of discussion, just, between, us on the call, and really want to kind of put something together for the students in future years to be able to have something to, reference. And, we excited to have you, a tremendous resource just related to your, past experiences as a, recruiter, not only just, general, but, executive level too. So interested in kind of, some of your thoughts and perspectives there. I know you put together, an awesome presentation. So I think, we'll kind of go through that and reference that. But, I'll rudely butt in and ask you some questions, because, I have a whole list already after I look through that. So Katie, maybe I'll turn it to you, just a quick introduction of, who you are, your firm, DGI, and then maybe we'll get into it.
Okay. Well, I was trying to figure out while you were talking how to share my nice presentation that I made. So let's see if I can do it or not. Let's see. There we go. Can you see it? Does anyone see
Yes.
it? All right. It might not be in the right viewing, but I think that it's good. Maybe. Now can you see it? Can you still see it?
Oh, yep.
Okay.
Now it's presentation. Yep, this way you want.
There we go. Okay. I got there. So yes, so who am I? So my name is Katie Minus. I'm a client relationship manager with Discipline Growth Investors here in Minneapolis. We are about a $6 billion asset management firm. We run small and mid cap portfolios for institutional clients, high net worth clients, and then we have a couple of mutual funds. I've been with Discipline Growth Investors for almost 8 years here. I joined in 2018, but I have over 20 years of industry experience, both working for asset managers and then, as Kurt had mentioned, also I did for a stint in the kind of middle of my career, did a few years in recruiting for the investment management industry. So, so I went to Minnesota Duluth. I was actually in the financial markets program, with which I believe there's quite a few teams actually from the program this year. But they that was where I kind of started out working with Joe Artem. I was the third year of the program, so it probably looks a little different than it did back when I was there. But I went to the University of Minnesota Duluth. I also interned with Wells Fargo while I was there, and then stayed on with Wells Fargo right after college. I got a job out in Las Vegas, of all places. So they sent me out there, worked there for a couple of years, and then I actually left Wells and moved to Chicago, and worked for an investment management firm there called Harris Associates. And so worked for them for about 8 years, but while I was there, I got my MBA at the University of Chicago, or not University of Chicago, Loyola University, there in Chicago. And we also worked on their trading desk to take them to 24-hour trading. So it was a pretty rigorous work schedule. And then adding an MBA in the evenings into it was pretty interesting, but loved what I was doing there. Eventually decided, though, that I wanted to move back to Minneapolis. I was from Minnesota. My family was here. And so for some personal reasons, I came back here. And in trying to figure out what I wanted to kind of do next, is how I kind of fell into my recruiting role. And so I spent 7 years actually. When I went to do it, I was actually talking to recruiters about the industry here in Minneapolis, and what other what firms here are could be looking, or it might be a good fit for me. And one of the recruiters said, "Well, I will recruit for the investment management industry across the country, and have you ever thought about doing that? And you could come and join my team." So I had never thought about doing that. So it was an interesting offer. But I took it, and it was actually a really, really good experience. I was in that type of a role for about 7 years, and worked with some of the largest investment management firms down to smaller ones as well. But I worked with T. Rowe Price, RBC, Vanguard, and really kind of helping them build out investment teams, their sales teams, their all sorts of different client teams and whatnot. But I had been working in the investment management industry, kind of in a really niche role within it. And then stepping back, you got to kind of take like a bird's eye view of these large corporations and how they built out their teams and their systems and what they decided to do next and all that kind of stuff. So it was almost kind of like a consulting role, in sense that you really got to know the firms really well and their teams and helping them design things. So, which is why I ended up staying in it much longer than I had anticipated. So I was doing it for 7 years. Um, in that time, I actually did volunteer a lot with the CFA Society here in Minnesota. I helped work on a compensation survey that we did. Probably now it's what, 10 years ago. But that was kind of my first volunteering with the society. And I've stayed in touch some years more than others ever since. And then more recently, I joined the board this year. But in that, I met some people who worked here at Disciplined Growth Investors, and that's how I landed kind of myself back into the investment management industry. And now I'm on the client team, and I'm doing more client-facing stuff. I do a lot of trading for the firm as well, so kind of still utilizing that trading background that I had in Chicago. So that's a little bit about me, and so I kind of have a unique, I guess, background, and I've been asked a variety of times to kind of talk about um, hiring, especially like in this industry, because I think um, you know, not everybody has the experience. You've either, you've applied, or you may have, maybe you're a manager and you've hired some people. But it is interesting, the recruiting side of things that I spent for so many years. I also helped hire Shannon at the CFA Society of Minnesota, so you can see the great work that I have done over the years.
And Katie, maybe just before we move on, Ryan Watala joined the call. He's helping, me out, run the CFA Research Challenge. So I'm gonna have him jump in, with some questions later
Yep.
on. But one thing that kind of stands out to me is, right, kind of think about it like that move to recruiting was kind of a career pivot, honestly, right? It was kind of in the same vein, same industry, but maybe talk to me about, how you kind of thought about that. Was that like a pro and con list? Who did
Yeah.
you kind of consult with that? Like, what were some of the, feelings that you had where it was like, okay, this is the right decision?
Yeah. It is interesting because I definitely, it wasn't a pivot, probably an intentional pivot, but it was really, and that's kind of why I think it's interesting that I stayed in it for 7 years, because when I took it, I thought, well, it could be interesting for a few years until maybe I figure out, what I want to do next, kind of in the industry, and it became a really interesting role and a consulting role, like I said, and I was traveling around the country and meeting with these large teams, and um it was something that I gained so much knowledge from it that I debated for probably the last 2 years of doing it, of do I want to continue to do this? Does this want to be my next path forward? And so one thing I always tell students, or anyone just getting into the industry, or even someone who's thinking about making a change within pivoting their career, um, it's okay to not know exactly what you want to do. Or even if you really thought you knew exactly what you wanted to do, to decide that, all right, maybe it wasn't everything that I thought it was going to be, or maybe there's something different, or maybe there's just a path that I can learn from, and then I can, that will serve me well going forward. So, and I think that's okay. I think a lot of times, especially people that are very analytical, which tend to be in the investment managers industry, is you go in being like, well, no, like I have to hit this, and then I have to get this milestone, and then I got to hit, and I can't take any missteps, or I can't, are very worried about taking the wrong thing. And I think it's okay, like if everything isn't just linear, and just remembering that, and always knowing and being confident in yourself to know no matter what, like I'll figure it out. This might, if I take this risk, or I take this pivot and it's not right, it's okay. Like you can decide, in 2 years or 5 years or whatever it's going to be, um, if it's not the right thing forever. But good chance if you're very interested and if it's something that, intrigues you, that it's a good pivot maybe at least for a while, even if it's not forever. And there's probably some things you can gain from it.
And to your point, you can always pivot back,
Yeah,
right? It's not a,
exactly.
yeah, decision forever.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Experience usually stays with you. So even if if you stop doing something for a little while and do something a little bit different, you still usually can remember what you were
Absolutely.
going down.
Riding a bike. Thanks
Yep.
for going through that. Yeah, back to you.
Yeah, so that's I guess a little bit about me. I'm happy to answer any more questions, but I put together just kind of a few tips that I thought would be helpful for anyone that's kind of looking, especially like for entry level roles and coming out of college. They're very standard, so by all means, it can like everything, it ebbs and flows. Some may speak to you more than others. But one thing is to kind of start early. I mean, even this is saying, late summer through fall. So if you haven't started yet, there's no better time than the present. So I would just say, start early, looking at what kind of things that you want to be doing, what kind of positions are out there, making, even if it's just, putting together lists or looking at certain firms you want to be with, or even knowing what size of firm you want to be at or what type of firm you want to be at. Do you want to be on the buy side or the sell side? Do you want to do you want to work for a large corporation like T. Rowe or Wells Fargo, or would you much rather be somewhere smaller? They're all very different. And if, it doesn't have to be like, well, then I'm only going to apply for that. You can still have preferences and you can still apply for, multiple things. But just kind of know kind of what you're looking for and start the process. Look at deadlines. There's a variety of ways, that companies recruit. But they all put deadlines in. And some are earlier than others. So that's why I think starting early is important, because some might be like, hey, we are going to have an offer out and somebody have accepted it by November. And if you don't say, hey, I'm going to start looking in January, well, then you've already lost that ability to even apply for it. So you're not even being considered. So that's where it's like, at least start knowing what's out there, kind of what's your plan, what do you need to have done in certain timelines and that kind of stuff. So just kind of getting organized is probably the best way to sum it up. Um,
And
the second, oh,
maybe,
go ahead.
sorry to cut you off. Maybe one thing
No.
I'll add that maybe you did say this and I missed it, so apologies, but just location too. I
Mhm.
think would be a big thing, right? Like,
Yep.
if you've never been to New York City, but are applying for jobs there. I don't know how much sense that really makes.
Yeah.
Maybe go check it out, right? Obviously, it costs some money to go do that. But for me, for example, right, went to New York City while I was in school, and I loved it for 2 days, but I wanted to go home right back to the Midwest, right? It was just not
Yep.
something that I enjoyed. So, I knew that when I was applying for jobs my senior year that I could pretty much just cross any job with a, in person in New York City kind of off my
Yep.
list. And that definitely helped with, narrowing it down. Something like you talked about with size of firm.
Nope, exactly. And that's absolutely right. I mean, you can say, some people don't want to leave Minnesota. So, I mean, if you know that, if you're saying, hey, like I'm looking in the Twin Cities area because I don't want to go anywhere else, well, that definitely narrows it down, but it also then, make sure that you're very focused on what is available here and what are you interested in here. But to your point also, traveling somewhere would you know, I was with Wells Fargo and they sent me to Las Vegas. I had never been to Vegas before I moved out there. And I that's fine. They moved me out there. I stayed for a year and a half. I had a year commitment that I had to stay, and so it's fine. Again, you can pivot and make it work. And it was good experience, and it was right out of college, so it was great. But yeah, maybe you don't want to just go and do that if you really have never been to somewhere or you don't know if you'll be interested. It's funny, my sister, who is actually a little bit younger than me, and she's not in this industry, but it's still kind of um, is similar. She wanted to move out to Portland, Oregon, and she was telling me this. She's 6 years younger than me, and you know, I was in the working world at the time, and I was like, "But have you ever been out there?" And she was like, "No, no." And I'm like, "Well, how do you know that's where you want to go?" And she's just like, "Well, I just seen pictures." So I took her on a trip out there, and me and her went and we toured. You know, went to Seattle and we drove around down to Portland or whatever. And you know, turns out she did love it. She still lives there. But you know, it is. It's a hey, if there's something that you really think that you're going to be interested in, it might be worthwhile to take a quick weekend trip or something. So it's a
Oh,
very good point.
thanks.
So yeah, the second thing is kind of more, I guess, focused on your resume. I think it's hard. You want to tailor your resume a little bit to each role, and by no means does that mean rewrite your resume every time. Does that no mean like, you know, spend hours on every submission that you are doing. That is not a good use of time. However, if you are, you know, if even if you can kind of put them in buckets and being like, hey, like, you know, I really want this analyst job, or these a subset of analyst jobs. You know, have a resume maybe that's ready that's more focused on like analyst work. If you're also going to apply, and maybe that's your, you know, your 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 thing you want the most, but you're also like, hey, like if I can get into a, you know, an operations job and work my way, or if I can get into a client, you know, something else, have some other options of and reword that to look, you know, I don't want to say look because then that looks, but that shows that you would also have skills in those other areas because there are, you know, some of them are transferable, but also having it be more specific to what you're actually applying to, other than just one blanketed resume that just goes out to everyone, is definitely helpful. Um, you know, quantify your impacts. That's a very, very big thing. And I think it's something that um, younger people don't think about. And also probably maybe have a hard time coming up with, because if you have work experience and you can say, hey, like I, you know, researched this many stocks and was able to beat the market by this much, or I, you know, brought in, I'm in sales and I brought in, you know, 200 million this year and whatever. That's a very easy thing to quantify, right? Well, if you're coming out of college and maybe your experience is, you know, you know, is has been serving or has been in different types of roles that maybe you don't have quantifications. There a lot of times still is, if you really think about it. I mean, you can still say, like, you know, let's say you're a server at a restaurant. You know, I was able to, you know, increase the amount of tables that I was able to handle, you know, by this much, you know, over the course of my time there. There is a way to quantify things, and if you really think about it, and really in any situation. And so having that and showing that you are making an impact and not just doing a task goes a really, really long way. And so so that's one thing I always say, to really think about those bullet points instead of just listing out the things that you're doing, showing what kind of impact the things you were doing was making on the company you were working for. um and then the last thing is to make sure you add whatever the posting says they want or that is required. Um, and I say this is a big one. We have an internship program here. It's been quite a successful one. And I wish I could take more credit for it, but I'm not running the internship program here at TGI. But I do help them, and this year they got, I mean, 100 and we hire about 4 interns a summer, and I think they got 120 applicants or something like that. So it's hard to get through them. However, it's very easy to parse ones out when we have said exactly what you need to do to submit it, and there's not a, you know, there's an essay missing or there's something that wasn't added. Then it's easy to dismiss it. So again, it's kind of goes back to um, if you don't know the deadline or you don't know whatever, if you don't do everything that they've asked for and checked all the boxes, you're going to get thrown out and you're never even going to get a chance. So just always, again, it's kind of part of the having the timeline and all that, you know, make sure, you know, we require an essay for our internship. And I think there are a lot of firms that are kind of trying to do something similar, whether it's an essay or a cover letter, or sometimes it's just here's 2 questions, answer these questions, or whatever it is. Um, we do it very specifically because one, it shows the ability to follow the directions on the job application. Um, and two, it requires you to put in a little extra work than just uploading your resume and hitting the submit button. It's not, we don't expect something onerous. Most places aren't going to make you like, unless you're once you get into the actual interview process, like do anything really time consuming. But it is showing that you're putting in the effort. And so always make sure you look at what are they requiring you to do? What do they want? Um, a cover letter, I always say, some people are like always at a cover letter. I don't know that you have to. Um, Especially if it's going to be, I don't think a cover letter is very effective when it's a very canned one that you're using on every single, and you can tell that you're just, changing the name and date and then submitting it along with your resume. I don't find it to be very useful. However, if it is something, especially if it is someone that you've maybe networked with, or you can really personalize the cover letter some way, whether it's even just you really it's a firm that you've been watching a long time and you know about it, or you've heard about it, or you just recently met somebody and learned about the firm, and if there's a way you can personalize that cover letter, I think that can add a lot of value. um, but if you're just going to use a canned one and you're not really going to put, I think, any extra effort into it, it's not that beneficial unless they're requiring it. So,
Katie, two questions. Your perspective on length, i.e. pages, length of your resume, and then GPA on there, not on there, maybe why
um,
not on there.
yeah. So length, uh, at most 2 pages. And I say that no matter how many years of experience if you have. If you are out of college or if you have 20 years of experience, if it's got to be a 5-page resume, I it's just too long. Then you've got to cut, you've got to figure out how to make it easier for someone to want to actually get through. Um, you're probably just getting a glance at you know what I mean, at the resume stage until they're really taking a deeper dive on you. So, 2 pages is the most. And then as far as GPA, I don't again that I do think does matter. I think if you're 20 years experience and you have all these other things, I don't think a GPA matters on your resume for someone coming right out of school and your experience within your education is the most recent and whatever. I think then it is important to put it on there. Some places even ask it, but especially for entry level positions. Um, so I think some people even ask you to send in a transcript and things like that. I know there's some, especially larger corporations, that do for certain positions. So I would put it out there, and is for anyone who's coming right out of college or even a few years out of college.
Thank you.
Mhm. So the next one is just applying online. You kind of have to. I think in this day and age, every application goes through some type of online submission almost. However, if you are just cold applying, if you're just going out there and finding all the postings and applying to as much as you can, it's a volume game. I mean, you're going to spend a lot of time doing it. I think networking is the best shortcut you can take, is really going out there and then being specific about, again, what types of firms you want, what size of firms you want, what location your firms are, the firms that you want to go to are, and all of that kind of stuff. And then if you can narrow that stuff down, networking becomes much more manageable as well, right? I mean, then you're blocking and tackling. You're being like, who could I reach out to at these firms that might be able to one, even just give me insight. I mean, it might seem like a firm you really are interested in, and you might talk to someone and then figure out it's maybe not. So I would, networking, and that I always say networking is something that you can do all the time. I mean, even before maybe applications are even coming out. I mean, networking is like a lifelong skill that if you could, you should be doing it at all times. I always found it interesting when I was a recruiter that I could reach out to someone like 5 times and they wouldn't respond to me. And then in 2 years later, when they were looking for a job, would be like, "Hey, I'm wondering if I could talk to you." And I'd be like, "Well, let's see. I tried to talk to you a lot of times and nobody was interested until you want a job." And it's um it's much easier if you are networking and you know somebody, even just on a personal level, and not that you have to know them really well, but know who they are, have taken the time to chat with them to learn a little bit about somebody. Um, and if you do that, then when the time comes that there's, an ask, it's a lot easier to ask than it is a cold ask of like, "Hey, can you put in a good word for me?" Well, if I don't know you until the day you're asking me to put in a good word for you, it's a little bit awkward of a conversation. Um, so as it gets closer, and as you're really on it, then I would say, start aiming for 5 to 10 applications a week or so. I mean, again, that I it depends. I think part of it is like again, what's your search parameters? Like if you're really focused on a few firms in Minneapolis, I don't know if you'll have 5 to 10 applications per week, but the point is really, make a goal and and try to stick to it and continue to do it. Don't just be like one day be like, all right, I put out 20 applications today and then sit on it for a month and then wait till you hear some, if you get responses. Really try to make it something that you're working on over time. And then the big thing is the outreach for messages. Again, this is just a networking thing. Find someone who, an alumni or friends or somebody who a neighbor knew somebody or the neighbor's cousin or whoever it is. As you're talking to someone, whenever somebody offers you informational interview or 15 minutes of someone's time, really try to take that up because that's, I think, really where you're going to have the most success and make the most impact. It's, you know, we're all we all are personal, we're all humans. So as much as you're applying to, you're throwing your resume out into the, internet, at the end of the day, somebody's reading it and you need to be able to connect with the people who are reading it. So I just put an example. It's a very, simple example of, what you can say. If you don't know what to say, I mean, it's a simple thing. It's a simple ask. Most people will give you 15 minutes of their time. Um, a lot of people really do love to help, especially love to help students and younger people. It's a mentoring thing, and as people get into their careers, it's something that I think a lot of people do enjoy. And I always just preface any student saying this is, but always remember that you are taking up people's time. So try to keep it to, 15 minutes, or I'm not saying you can't go over, or if you're having a really great conversation that you should cut it off or anything like that. However, do realize that, that you are using people's time. I have an example of this last year, actually, in our internship program. We had one person who applied for the internship and then subsequently sent every employee at DGI a ask on LinkedIn to have a subsequent informational interview with them. And they talked and talked and talked. And there was probably 6 or 7 of us that took it. And then we were like, we need to stop this person. Like they are wasting, I mean, they were basically wasting like the entire firm's time, asking the same questions to each single person at the firm. And um it was a little onerous. So always when doing that, yes, don't bombard everybody at a firm and try to take up their time. Really be cognizant of the ask and respectful of their time and be, gracious about it. And it usually people are happy to do it.
Katie, one thing that you brought up that, I really liked was, it's an easy ask and, a lot of people will offer up kind of connections. And I think that means a lot, if people are kind of going out there and doing that. One thing
Mhm.
that I'll add is, always keep those people updated.
Hmm.
Right, when, say Katie makes an introduction for me to meet Shannon, right? Like I
Yep.
always, follow up with Katie after the fact and say, Katie, thank you so much for, the introduction. I talked to Shannon about this, blah, blah, blah. And I think like that shows, appreciation for it
Yep.
and kind of like a follow up and not just a transactional relationship that, I'm going to get on this call for 15 minutes and ask for something and then never talk to you again because you can't offer me something. It's to your point, Katie, the second time that you have an interaction and there's a job posting and they put a referral in for you. That second time is so much easier than, hey, I'm this random person. I want this job.
Absolutely. No, I agree. And that's the thing is like really have gratitude for not only the person, yeah, that gave you the 15 minutes, but also the person that introduced you to the person that gave you the 15 minutes, right? Like it's not just the person that's talking to you about the experience. It's also the networking that you did to get there. And so thanking all that, and it doesn't need to be much. Just, a quick message is really all it takes. So
Hey, Katie, if I
yeah,
could hop into with one question for you
yeah.
here. You alluded to in your last slide, if you know somebody, you can maybe tie it into a cover letter. But could you just touch a little bit more? If you do have a connection at somewhere you're applying, what's the best way to get that message across or try to make that connection with whoever's viewing those resumes and applications?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple ways, and I think a lot of it depends on the situation itself or who you know at the place. Um, if you are sending in a resume and, maybe a week prior, and that's how you heard about the posting, like let's say you were at a networking event and you had met somebody there that had told you about the opportunity that you're applying to. I would write that in the cover letter. I would say, hey, I met so and so at your firm, and they had such great things to say, and that this opportunity was available, and I'm very interested, and here's why, and all that kind of stuff. And then after you send that in to, to the HR team, then I would reach out to that person that told you about it and be like, hey, thanks so much. Again, this ties into thank you. Thank you so much for telling me about this. I did go ahead and apply, you know, um, and if that person, I don't know, I go back and forth on this. You could ask them if they could put in a good word, or if you're not comfortable, because if you just met them, maybe it's not the right time. I think it's kind of a situational thing. But a lot of times, if they are comfortable, they probably will offer that and be like, hey, I'd be happy to, let them know that I talked to you and whatnot. So I think if you put it in the cover letter, the team, whoever's, actually reading the resumes and the cover letters, it can take the time to reach out to that person. And again, this kind of also goes situationally of what size of firm it is. I mean, if it's a really large firm, they might be like, okay, whoever this person is at the firm. You look at someone, a 20-person firm like mine, I know everyone here. So if there's a name in there, I'm going to be like, oh, let me walk down to their office and see what they thought of this person, or that they, how their interaction went. So I think it's very much a situational thing, but I think anytime that you can show a connection there, um, is great. If even if you didn't put it in the cover letter and say you applied and then you met someone or and whatnot, anytime you can kind of say, hey, if there's any way that you can, you know, put in a good word or tell, anything like that. I mean, again, a lot of it is situational. It depends on how comfortable you are with that person. Do you know them really well, or have you just met them once or whatnot? But if you can make anything that you're doing so more personal is the best way. And that's the hard part with like the days that we live in of everything being submitted via online. It's like, well, how do you make yourself stand out by adding a personal touch to it? If that's in a cover letter, if that's, finding someone who can put in a good word, if that's, however that is. But that's the point is finding a way to personalize it. Um, and I think it'll just, it'll at least bump you up on the list. Did that answer your question? Okay. Um, So yeah, so then the next thing I have is kind of just practice interviews. I mean, I think interviewing is is an art in itself. I mean, you there's 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 a fine line between practicing so much that you sound canned and that not personable, but also being comfortable in the types of questions that they're going to ask you, being comfortable talking about yourself. Um, I think that comes with experience and over time, but especially students, people who, are coming out of college and don't have a ton of, experience, uh, get comfortable with what you're going to say about yourself. Why do you want to work at this company? And it can be a variety of reasons, but have your why and have that ready. I mean, they're going to ask that. They're going to ask, tell me a little bit about yourself. You know, you it can be whatever. It doesn't have to be. I actually always, whenever I ask that question when I'm talking to people, whether it's interviewing or not interviewing, like I really just want to know what makes people tick. It doesn't even have to do anything about the job or the industry or anything at all. Like we all have personal sides to ourselves other than our careers and what we do on a day-to-day basis. And I think again, the more you can make a bit better connection with whoever you're talking to, with whoever you're interviewing with, if you can make a connection with them, that goes a lot longer than whatever, you can tick off on your list of things that list of experience. Um, so just kind of, having that, doing it to yourself, sitting in the mirror, talking about yourself. It's not always a natural thing. Um, and so just trying to practice it with your friends, your mom, I don't know. And then write some strong stories, 6 to 8, however many you want, but just on kind of like behavioral questions. And um, I said using the star format, it's a pretty basic thing. It's really just kind of gives you some ideas of you want to, if someone's going to ask you, tell me about a time that you dealt with conflict. One, think about how you would answer that because it's again a very basic question, but also think about how it kind of goes back to the same thing about like having uh, actionable quantitative description on your resume. Like if someone's asking you that question, give the context of the situation. What was your responsibility in the situation? What did you specifically do to make it better? And what was the result and how did it impact it? And that goes back to the you know numbers. So just think about it in that way, and again, practice because again, it's probably not something that comes really natural, especially for younger people. So just practice it and kind of have some things ready. Don't do it so much that you literally are just memorizing something and then like going into interview waiting for these questions to come up so you can recite it back. But again, make it personal. Find things that you've done. Think about it because sometimes I think students especially don't even think about their experience and what they've done and how that could translate because they're in their mind they're like, well, I haven't worked in a corporation before. I've maybe only been, I've done these ad hoc jobs, but I have never worked. There are situations in any of those jobs, in any of your student life or anything that you've done, sports, debate, whatever you've been in, there is a way and there's definitely transferable skills that you can take that and give an example of a situation in that. So, but think about it because if you haven't thought about it and then they ask you that in an interview, chances are you're going to stumble and you're going to maybe not have the best answer. So that's just something that I always like to kind of have students especially really just practice and think about and be prepared for.
Katie, you've obviously been through, a lot of interviews of, the hiring side of the table. At the end of basically every interview that anyone's ever done has been, any questions for me? Maybe talk a little bit, how you kind of think about, posing that to people. What are you looking for? You
Yeah.
kind of thoughts on like canned, questions,
Mhm.
not having any questions, just
Yeah.
thoughts there.
The worst thing you can do in an interview is say you don't have any questions. And it's because I think when you've been talking and all this kind of stuff and a lot of times too, sometimes it's hard because you might have been asking questions throughout, and so maybe some of those questions. And that's why I do say come with a long list of questions because you might a bunch of those questions might get used up throughout the conversation, right? And then when it comes to the end and they're like, "Well, do you have any questions?" You don't want to say no because saying no to someone who is sitting there interviewing it is like really like you don't have anything that you want to ask, then it's comes off like you're disinterested. Like so I always say too, when you're interviewing, I think especially younger people are like, nervous, right? Because you're going in and you're like, they're interviewing me. And I always say, don't think about it like that because it's really not. Like you're interviewing each other. Like you don't have to take any job that is offered to you, and the job might not be right. So when you are thinking about questions that you want to, come with a long list of questions and questions that you do want answered, think about that because it does matter. Like those, think about things that are important to you for someone who is, you know, going to work there. What is important to you to know about the company, about the role, about your manager, about the team, about the opportunity, any of it. I mean, just think about what's important to you and have a long list of questions that you can ask. And you might ask them all and you might ask two of them. It's again situational. And it depends how the conversation probably has gone up to that point. But a lot of it, you always want to come with some questions because it does show interest. It shows that you came prepared. It shows that you came very interested. And that goes a long way, as well as I say, you're interviewing each other. Just because they offer it to you doesn't mean that it's the right job for you. And so you do your due diligence by coming with questions that you feel like you need to get answered. So if an offer does come your way, you know whether or not you want to take it.
Yeah, because at the minimum, you probably have to spend 40 hours a week with that person. So you might as well, ask them some questions back.
Exactly. Exactly.
Good points.
Hmm. So, um, and yeah, and then the big thing is I think don't panic. I think a lot of times, especially like let's say if you don't have something lined up yet at this point, it's like, okay, oh, now there's only half of the year is left, and I need to find something and whatnot. Again, just have a good plan in place, even if you haven't started yet and you're going to start now. Again, put a plan in place, do your research, follow the kind of whatever plan you put together, um, and you'll be fine. You you may not get the exact job that you wanted. Even if you start early, you may not get the exact job that you wanted. And that's okay because it goes back to like not every path is linear, not every um, job is the perfect thing that you thought it was going to be. Even if you get the job that you really, really want, corporations change. And so it might not be the job you want in a year or two from now. And again, it's okay. Like you have to figure out how to pivot and you have to figure out what makes the most sense for you, for your career, for your goals, for your aspirations. And that might change over time. But either way, just for starting out, make a plan, you know, find what you think is the best for you at this time that fit the things that are important to you, your location, your type of firm, your aspirations, or even if it's just I need to gain this type of experience. I know this job isn't my dream job, but I need this experience to be able to get to my dream job. That's okay. Just know that it's taking you in the right direction, and I think that you'll be happy with it. I always also say too, like, it kind of what you were alluding to, if you're spending 40 hours a week with these people, I always say the culture and the type of firm and the type of people you're working with is way more important than the actual tasks that you're doing because those can change over time, right? I mean, if you're there and you're doing a stellar job, chances are you're going to get more responsibility or you're going to get more opportunities to move within the company or wherever you want to go, right? But if you don't like the people you work with and you don't like the culture and you don't like whatever, it makes it real hard to want to get up and do a really good job for somebody if you're not interested in that. And so it goes back to kind of interviewing goes both ways and really find something that will help you in the long run. And I think you're going to be fine. That's all I have. So unless you guys have more questions.
Oh, Katie, can you just talk a little bit about when you're in an interview and once it's done, what's your experience or what's your suggestions for follow-up, whether it be a thank you or just touching base after the
Yeah.
fact?
Yeah. Well, one of the questions, when you asked about, having questions, I always say one of the questions that you should always have is, what's the next steps? What happens from here? What's the process? And so if you're in the point where you're getting an interview and you've met with somebody, whether that's been a phone call or that's in person or that's with the whole team or with one person, always ask that at the end, so that right? I mean, they'll tell you, they'll say, well, I have 20 more people I need to talk to, or, we're going to make a decision on paring this down and bringing people in person by Friday, or whatever it is. Usually they'll be pretty honest, and they might not give you an exact timeline, but they'll be pretty honest on as much as they know. And so once you have that information where you get their answer, then that helps you on what's the appropriate way to follow up, right? I mean, if they said, all right, well, we're gonna get through all the you were the first interview and we have 8 more that we have to have phone calls with in the next week, but you'll hear from us by Wednesday of next week, then I would say, one, always follow up with an email or whatnot saying thank you for your time, maybe the next day or whatever, or later that day, even like pretty quick. And then wait. And then if they said by Wednesday, or if they gave you a specific time, if you haven't heard from them by Thursday or Friday, then it's okay to reach out, right? Because they gave you the time and whatever. Now, don't reach out on Monday and say, hey, any update? Well, I told you Wednesday. You know what I mean? So listening and knowing how to follow up because you've asked the right question and you're reacting to what they told you, then that's kind of guides on how you should follow up. But you should always give a thank you, whoever you met with, whether it was 5 people, whether it was a phone call, whether it was in person. Always try to get their contact information and be able to just send them a quick thank you that you enjoyed their time. And again, I always say, if you can personalize it, if there was something in that conversation that you guys connected on, whether it was about the job or it wasn't, it might be that, hey, we both saw this movie and it happened to come up in our conversation. Anything that you can tie back to something that they'll remember more about you than they would about anybody else that they talk to. Because you have to remember, sometimes these people are having a lot of conversations. And whatever you can do to make yourself stand out and them to remember that your conversation was good and you guys connected on any type of level, I would say that in the thank you email.
Awesome. Katie, that's so helpful.
Yeah.
I really, and I'm sure everybody else, values your perspective, just, having gone through it and continue to go through it, with your, stellar internship program and all the people you talk to. So, thank you. Nothing else
Yes.
from me, Ryan, if you had anything, Spencer, thanks for hopping on, but Megan and Shannon, you guys have done interviews in your life, a million times over. So any questions for Katie or anything that stuck out to you?
I was just gonna say, when you were talking about the 15-minute interview, the other thing, the advice also have given young people is, when you actually get the time set, to tell them, I have 4 questions, or be very specific about what you're asking so they know they've agreed to 15 minutes. You on your side are going to keep it to 15 minutes because you have 3 questions, you have 4 questions. So setting, I think, those parameters is helpful. And another kind of funny piece of advice, but actually has been very helpful through the years, is I back in the day was also advised to, when you practice interviewing, practice in the clothes you're planning to wear to the interview, so that you're not tugging at your jacket, or so that you can be comfortable in what you're wearing.
That's interesting. I've never thought about that advice, but that is very good advice. And to add to that, because this just made me think of something else, in this day and age where there can be an interview where you're doing what like we are, a Zoom or call, um, know what you are going to look like in your Zoom call, because even though your hair might look great in the mirror, the way it is when your camera is focused or whatever can be really distracting. We had an interview a couple years ago for an operations role, and she she looked like she had like a mop on top of her head, and I couldn't stop staring at it for the entire hour that I was talking to her, and it was really just it was distracting. And so it was nothing but her. She was a wonderful candidate, but like it. So think about that in this day and age, where if you are on camera and you're doing it virtually, about what you look like on camera versus what you maybe look like in the mirror.
One way to be memorable. Good point, Shannon. Dressing for game day kind of thing.
Yeah.
I get it. Awesome. Well, everybody, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time, Katie. Great perspective. Look forward to sharing this with all the students. I know it'll be a tremendous resource for this year and to come. Looks like Ryan and Katie are in the same building, or Fifth Street
I
Towers.
know it does. We are.
Well, I'll have a drink and celebrate after on me. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you so much.